welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. My name is Katherine Hubert. I am a small business owner in Greensboro, North Carolina. I also have OCD. Today we're going to talk about how those two things intersect and a little bit of my journey from the time that I was diagnosed at age 16 to where I am now as a 36-year-old, as an entrepreneur, and someone who has a business that has an integrated hiring model for adults with disabilities. So 50% of my team is disabled, 50% of my team is non-disabled. I have a restaurant. I think those are all the major points that you need to know before we dive in, so let's go. Today we're going to talk about 3 common myths that I see or experience when it comes to OCD, and then 3 ways that OCD regularly impacts my life, not just as a person, but also as a business owner. To be honest, OCD isn't something that I cognitively think about on a daily basis, but that has not always been the case. It certainly has been all-consuming for me at different points in the past, especially around the time that I was diagnosed when things were at their most heightened state and I didn't understand my brain. I didn't know what was going on. That was causing me a lot of anxiety, which was also causing me depression, and it was honestly fairly debilitating and disabling in my life, and a lot of the things that I enjoyed doing and the things that I just needed to do on a daily basis got put on pause. And I really questioned and wondered whether or not I would get to re-engage with life in the ways that I wanted to. And so standing here today as a business owner, I'm thankful that I've been able to. And that's also come with a lot of hard work of researching OCD, understanding what that looks like in my life, understanding what tends to exacerbate my OCD, what tends to spike my anxiety, how those two things are related, all of that. So I'm here today to share about that some, and also just to create a personal connection and experience, because one of the things I found to be most challenging for me at the time was just feeling pretty isolated. This is 20 years ago, and so social media was not the thing that it is now, and people certainly weren't talking online in a face-to-face format about OCD and what their experiences were, and I didn't know anybody else who had OCD, so it felt very like a lonely little world. I didn't have someone else to relate to. I didn't have someone else to ask questions to. A lot of it was my own process of self-discovery. So if nothing else, and you're in the same boat with me, hi, welcome. We can do this together. All right, so let's talk about a few myths. I have found that the way that OCD is talked about in our world and the way that it's portrayed oftentimes on television have not been incredibly accurate to my own experience. Now, every person is different, and every person is going to experience even the same diagnosis differently. So, disclaimer for that. But there are a lot of jokes, I feel like, and quick references that people make to OCD that aren't necessarily accurate, and I've kind of gotten used to that over time. People claiming that any hypervigilance, any desire for something to be neat and orderly, that all of that is lumped under this idea of OCD, which is not necessarily the case. So, myth number 1, all obsessions lead to compulsions. That is not true. I am a person who is obsessive, but not really compulsive. And that is called a pure obsession, which I think is kind of a funny name for it. But all that aside, a pure obsession, I have the intrusive thoughts. I have things that I can fixate on and that I can get really stuck in loops in. I don't really have the compulsive outlets that are usually the means of trying to alleviate what that obsessive or intrusive thought or pattern is. Every once in a while, something will a compulsion will slip out, but that's not where I get stuck in the loop. So that's something to me that's an important distinction, is where am I just going over the same thing over and over and over and over again? And that to me happens internally, and that's in my thought process. It's not so much in my actions. If I have a compulsion, it's usually a one and done, where I'm worried about, did I turn the oven off before I leave the house? I either will play back through the steps in my head and reassure myself that I did, or I'll go check it once and turn it off and then I leave. I'm not going to go back and forth to check it, but I will go back and forth in my mind, wondering or worrying whether or not I did. So that's a small example for me, but just so you know, not every obsession leads to a compulsion. Myth number 2. that OCD is super obvious and over the top. You can spot someone with OCD a mile away. Is not necessarily true. There are probably a lot of people that you know or that you interact with who have OCD and you wouldn't necessarily know it. It's more under the radar. It's something that people have learned to either hide or they have become very controlled about, or they've worked to manage and mitigate in different ways in their lives. So it's not like I think of the TV show Monk from a while ago, right? Where it's like everybody knows that he has OCD. It's very obvious when you first meet him in every interaction that he has with every person. It's dialed up. It's kind of over the top, but it's also just very apparent. And that's not the case with everybody. And myth number 3, that managing anxiety is impossible. I think there's a lot of assumptions that come, and I talk about this sometimes in workshops when I disclose that I have OCD. I'm like, what does that make you think about me? And there's usually a whole list of preconceived ideas that people have, but a lot of them are that you're highly anxious, that you're really anal, that you're controlling, and sometimes those things can be true about me, but that's not always the case, and I'm not constantly living in a state of anxiety. I've learned tools and techniques for myself over the years that help me manage that anxiety. So it is something that I still feel is something that I'm in tune with, but it's not something that I'm unable to manage or to live with. All that being said, how does that impact me as a small business owner? And why am I talking about that? What's the importance? It impacts me in my business in a lot of different ways, but we're going to talk about 3 specifically today. The first one being is that it actually has pretty significantly impacted the business model that I have and how I interact with my team. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, I have a restaurant with an integrated hiring model. 50% of my team is disabled and 50% of my team is non-disabled. And one of the things that we are working and fighting towards is equal employment and disability justice. I believe in equality and not exceptionalism. I believe that a person with a disability is just as qualified and capable of having a job as a person without a disability. And that's the mindset that I approach my team and my work with. A lot of that actually stems from my own experience as a teenager, going through the process of honestly feeling like I was crazy. I remember having the thought, like, surely if I was crazy, someone would have told me. But I felt like my brain was just so out of control and it was so unknown. And I had just this onslaught of intrusive thoughts and I didn't know what to do with them and they freaked me out. But they freaked me out, yes. And that really limited what I was able to do and participate in for a while because my anxiety was so high. And I was living in a state, honestly, of a nervous breakdown and panic attack around the clock. I was having night terrors. My anxiety levels were so high. I was having trouble eating. I was a mess. And in that, I didn't want people to do things for me. I wanted to get back to a place where I could do things for myself. So a big part of my motivation, which ended up being through therapy, was getting to a place where I was able to understand myself. I was able to be safe and comfortable with my own brain and to reduce the anxiety that I had so that I could re-enter activities in life the way that I wanted to. I wanted to do that for myself. I wanted to be independent. And so that translates into my work because I have seen the bias and the belief in our world and on my team that people with disabilities are not capable of independence, that they're not as qualified as people without disabilities, and that narrative really sinks in and can impact the level of confidence or independence that a person has. And so my stance with my team is, I believe in you. I think you can do this. If it's a skill that you need to learn, if it's a tool that you need to be taught, I'm happy to do those things, but I'm doing those things with the intent of you becoming independent in your work and doing this on your own. I'm here to support you. I'm here to cheer you on. I'm not here to do it for you. So that really goes, that is my belief about disability, but a lot of that comes from my own experience of being at a place in my life where I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to and reaching back for that independence, being grateful for people in my life who took the time to help give me some of the tools, or scaffolding, as my friend Kristen likes to say, in order to get there. But it was me still getting there. It was me doing the work. It was me getting to a place where I could be independent again. And those are the things that I'm pushing for on my team, and has been pretty instrumental in the way that I operate with my staff and the business model and mission that we have as a whole. Second way that it impacts, and this is going to split kind of in two parts, which is hypervigilance. This has been both an asset and also provides a decent level of anxiety in my work life. So it's been an asset in terms of managing people, being able to make a plan and think it through from all the different angles. Part of OCD for me has always been what if. My brain just naturally goes to what if this, what if this, what if this, and I'm like playing out all these different scenarios in my mind. That can be exhausting, but it also has been really helpful in terms of thinking through a business plan from all different angles, from problem solving. I'm a very good problem solver, and a lot of that is because I've already thought of a bunch of those problems in my mind and how I would solve them. But I'm very quick to be able to identify patterns. My pattern recognition is high. I understand people and their motives really well because of that. I am able to tap into that when it comes to management and how to get a team and a group of people towards a common goal. It helps with my finances in keeping books straight in terms of being able to be strategic about our scheduling. That level of paying attention to detail and being really thorough has definitely been an asset for me in terms of not only starting a business, but then a business that survived the pandemic and a business that's still here. So that's been an asset. A way that it can be challenging is I still do have intrusive thoughts every day, which if you don't know what those are, they're kind of thoughts that I always picture, like I picture it almost as another character or person in my brain that like jumps out and tries to scare me. And how part of how I take the thrill away, which is where the anxiety comes from, is by not getting surprised and scared. So I'm like, isn't that fun to scare somebody if they're not scared? And that's kind of how I picture the like intrusive thought character in my mind that's always like, did I get you? I'm like, not that time. And then eventually, it kind of goes away because it's like, oh, this isn't fun anymore. But it still does happen. And a lot of those intrusive thoughts for me have always centered around areas of safety. And so working in a restaurant, there's so many safety concerns on a daily basis. Again, in some ways that pays off because I'm like, sanitation and safety rules, I have them all memorized. Like I am so hypervigilant about that. We have a very clean restaurant because it's something that I really care about. But, I think about every time I'm cutting something, especially fruit, for whatever reason, the fruit plates, I'm also always thinking about cutting my fingers off, which is kind of gruesome, but has just become part of the routine for me. So there's a little bit of an inside scoop into my brain. My fingers are all here. I haven't cut them off. It's obviously not a rational fear, or at least not a fear that's based off of my real life experience, but it's there nonetheless. Shayjana's teammates, your keyword for this week in honor of this video, and also inside out too, is anxiety. And then lastly, there is a strong connection for me between my stress levels and then OCD patterns. So I have noticed that in times where I'm under extreme stress, that's when OCD can tend to also spike for me, or some of those OCD more like tendencies or patterns can spike. So managing my stress is something that I pay attention to, and that's important to me for my overall mental and emotional health, but then just for the sustainability of my team and my business. I think the fact that so many people depend on me for their livelihoods is a really motivating piece of staying healthy and staying in a place where I can be present, I can be mentally sharp, I'm taking care of my emotions. I do that in a lot of different ways. Counseling has been really helpful for me over the years in and out of crisis. I've found it to be just really helpful maintenance when I'm not in crisis so that I don't get to a place of crisis. Taking a walk at the end of the day when I get home from work helps me to decompress and just let go of what happened in the day. A lot of times I find when I'm walking, I'll like feel myself take a deep breath and exhale like for the first time that day. And so that helps my nervous system reset. I have a dog and she's actually right there. But she's a really helpful part of my life and routine, making sure that I go home, I have something else that I'm taking care of that needs some time and attention, that's nurturing, that helps ground me at home and make sure that things aren't just all about work all the time. Making sure that I'm eating, that I'm sleeping, taking my vitamins, all of those basic things, that I'm exercising, that I'm listening to my body in that, days that going for a run is helpful to relieve stress and anxiety, then that's a great option. Sometimes it's gentle yoga where I'm doing 5 poses in an hour and I'm just being really calm. So paying attention and being compassionate to myself in that and giving myself what I need, and then paying attention to my red flags when I start to notice kind of my warning signals for like my stress is getting too high, I'm getting too close to burnout. And then I have another list of things that are a little bit more extreme, like going away for a weekend or driving out of the city or getting into the woods for several hours or completely disconnecting from my phone. Like there are things that I do that are kind of bigger resets that aren't happening on a daily basis, but that I kick into gear when I start to notice that my stress or my burnout is getting too high to help bring me back down. Oh, and the last thing, having trusted friends and family and teammates that I can process with, that's also been really helpful, because a lot of the times the fears that I have in my mind actually are pretty irrational, but they feel really, really logical when they're inside my head. And it takes me saying them out loud to someone that I feel safe with for me to realize like, oh, I don't need to be afraid of that. I'm spending a lot of time and a lot of energy fixated on or obsessing over something that's not going to happen or that actually sounds ridiculous once I say it out loud. But as long as I keep it inside, it feels really real. And so sometimes just the act of getting it out is what helps kind of pop that bubble. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Thoughts, questions, comments, how you experience OCD, questions about how I do, please drop them below. I'll see you next time.